If you've been a fan of this channel for any length of time, you know that I absolutely adore LA Noire. So today I'm going to look at every case that game has to offer, every mission that game has to offer, and I am going to do what I do best. I'm going to rank them. Before we get into the video, I would like to announce that my Patreon has officially been relaunched. Yes, I'm back on Patreon because honestly, I would like to get more serious with this channel and other channels that may be coming up. And in order to be able to do that, I really need your guys' support. Now, over on my Patreon, you can find 3 tiers. The first tier gives you complete access to the Average Joe podcast, which is a bi-weekly multimedia podcast where I talk about games, films, TV shows, music, wrestling, UFC, whatever is popular in media at that moment. The next tier up is where you get the credit for supporting this channel, and at the end of every single video, you will appear in the credits of said video. And finally, the highest tier is the producer tier, where I will give you a verbal shout out at the start of every single video for keeping the lights and the mics running. This really does mean a lot to me because I've had this channel for going on 4 years now, and I feel like I finally actually know how to make videos now, so I feel more ready than I ever have to go forward with this. If you've been watching the channel a long time or just started yesterday, it would really mean a lot to me if you could go support. Don't feel like you have to, you're welcome to still watch these videos, but yeah, it would really be appreciated. Any support is always massively appreciated. With that being said, let's get into the ranking. Now, to be perfectly honest, I don't remember the name of every single LA Noire case, but I do remember every single moment because I've played this game far too many times. I got it when I was like 11 years old, which was probably far too early, but regardless, I played it, I loved it, and here we are today. So, let's get right into it, starting with the Red Lipstick Murder. Now, the Red Lipstick Murder is the first case in homicide, and to say the least, it's pretty shocking when you first get into it. Now, this game played off the real-life Black Dahlia murder case, which, by the way, is absolutely fascinating, and I mention it in my retrospective of LA Noire. And in this case, you stumble across a woman that has been murdered and has been covered in writings in red lipstick. Investigating the life of the victim, Celine Henry, you get to see an interesting cast of characters, including an abusive husband. However, going against your partner, Rusty Galloway's first inclination is a good idea, because by the end of the case, you realize that it is Alonzo Mendez, who owned a vehicle that was near the scene of the crime. You find a relatively mysterious lead pipe covered in blood, which most people don't have kicking around their flat, almost like that's some foreshadowing to later. And there's also even more foreshadowing as you meet a shady bartender. That being said, I don't know if this is necessarily the best homicide case. It's not till later that this game really hits its stride. This is kind of just an introduction to the case. That being said, it has some absolutely fantastic dialogue with Rusty, which is every piece of dialogue with Rusty, and for that reason, I'm going to put it in good. Following that, we have the Golden Butterfly, which I would argue is actually the best homicide case. Again, similar to the murder before, this time you're presented with yet another suspicious husband, a suspicious husband who just so happens to be burning his blood-stained shoes. However, this is where LA Noire grasps the political element of the police system, as you also come across a suspect who is a known paedophile in the area, Eli Rooney. And despite the husband having a lot more evidence against him, you're pressured by the captain of the police, that scary Irishman, to arrest the paedophile and finally put him behind bars. It makes an interesting question of how often these political aspects get into police work, and by the end of it you do feel conflicted as to whether you've arrested the correct man. I take that back actually, I'm not sure it's the best case in homicide, however it is definitely great. After that, we have the White Stocking Murder, in which you come across yet another woman in the same predicament, this time killed just across the road from a fruit market. You meet another abusive husband, as well as an old woman who Cole Phelps calls a hag, and there's even more foreshadowing to later as you find a strange picket in a completely destroyed room in the suspect's house. That being said, this murder has a twist, as you discover that Clem Feeney, a regular at the bar that the victim was last seen at, owns the fruit market across the way. And again, you find a mysteriously placed box of her possessions, as well as yet another bloodstained tire iron. It's a nice little twist that makes you again feel kind of conflicted, because why would someone leave a body across the road from where they work? This is the mission that you start feeling real doubt about these murders, and you start debating whether Cole's same doubts are actually true and valid. And it is also incredibly memorable. So once again, I'm going to put it in great. The white shoe slaying goes along a similar formula. However, this time you see an interesting twist on the past cases. Instead of an abusive husband, this time there are multiple suspects who were seen dancing and flirting with the victim at the bar she was at. These suspects are also put alongside a local hobo, as the game calls it, a local homeless person, who after some investigation is shown to have some even more suspicious evidence directly located in his place of residence. That being said, I wouldn't say this case is the most memorable in homicide, so I'm going to put it once again in good. The studio secretary murder, however, is an absolutely fantastic case, in which you find yet another dead body of a woman laying out as some tracks. After some investigation, you find out that this woman is living rough, sleeping in the back of a bar. And she's also a good acquaintance of a local communist writer, who you have some fascinating conversations with. The writer himself doesn't show to have any remorse to someone who he claimed he hated with a burning passion, and this leads Cole to arrest said writer. This mission has interesting locations, a fantastic chase sequence, a tailing sequence that is actually fun, and some phenomenal investigations. And for that, I'm going to put the studio secretary murder in iconic. And capping off the homicide desk, we move to the Quarter Moon murders, the culmination of this grand conspiracy, this serial killer that's been running around LA. This mission has phenomenal set pieces. It takes you to iconic locations across LA, and it culminates in finding out that the killer is an agency bartender who works at different bars across the country, meaning he never returns to the same bar and can prey on women whenever he likes. Heartbreakingly though, it's revealed that this killer is related to a government official, and once again the pressure and politics of the police department come into play, meaning that these women will never get true justice, as we kill him down and the entire thing is covered up. I think the Quarter Moon murders is the turning point for Cole Phelps' character, someone who at first was optimistic about justice, now jaded by the increasingly political police system. And there is no other option than putting this in iconic as well. Now, homicide is most people's favourite part of LA Noire, however the other desks have some fantastic cases as well. But before we look at the good desks, let's look at the worst one, the opening tutorial sequence in which Cole Phelps is a traffic cop. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't really like any of these cases. I usually skip them anytime I replay the game, and for that reason, I'm just gonna put them all in trash. Actually no, I take that back. The final case in this desk is actually pretty decent. It incorporates some elements of the anti-Semitic rhetoric of America in the 1940s and 50s, and its conflicts are mildly interesting. However, it's still very, very linear, and for that reason, I'm gonna move that one up to flawed. Now, the first case on the traffic desk is absolutely excellent. It's the case everyone uses as the example of an LA Noire case, as Cole and Stefan Bukowski come across a car covered in blood, showing a seemingly brutal murder scene. However, this is no real murder. This is a setup, as a married man fakes his death to try and fly off in the sunset with a younger woman. This mission flips the script on what you've come to expect thus far in LA Noire, and it does it straight away, allowing for you to look forward at every other case that comes next with a little bit of doubt and skepticism. It's clear that not everything is as it seems. The driver's seat is iconic. The console's car, however, not so much. Now, this was a DLC case, and although it's kind of interesting, it shows some political aspects as an Argentinian government member's car is stolen. It's revealed that the official is abusing his power to manipulate young boys into sexual acts, and although that's an interesting thought, the case itself doesn't really hold up, and some of the facial animations in this scene particularly don't really show any doubt at all. That's where this gif comes from. Like, everyone's seen this gif. This is like the LA Noire gif. The console's car isn't terrible, but you can tell why it was made DLC, and I'm putting it in flawed. Now, A Marriage Made in Heaven is a story that we've seen countless times, in which a newly found adulterous couple murder the husband to get his life insurance and get away scot-free. And although it's a good concept and it opens pretty well, the mission's kind of very obvious in the direction it's going. It's also very short, meaning that the twist doesn't have much impact. It's not abysmal, but it's also just kind of boring. Flawed. Now, A Slip of the Tongue is another DLC case, and you can once again easily tell. In this mission, Cole uncovers a car theft ring in the city, and although it's a nice change of pace from the constant murders that this game keeps throwing at you, I don't know, just again, kind of dull and boring. It fleshes out the city and the criminal underworld a little bit more, but it's not massively interesting, and again, it's kind of obvious where the case is headed. In fact, I'd say that this goes so much so that this is probably the most forgettable mission in the entire game, and I'm gonna put it in trash. But the same does not go at all for The Fallen Idol. The Fallen Idol is an excellent critique of 1940s and 50s Hollywood, the way power was completely abused to manipulate young women into doing certain things that they didn't want to do. We come across so many of these sleazy Hollywood executives. One of them has a two-way mirror into a bathroom and a literal casting couch, and as it's revealed to Cole, that person is actually an informant for the Vice Department. Speaking of the Vice Department, this is where we meet the most despicable character in all of gaming, Roy Earl, which is an excellent introduction, and this entire thing ends in the revelation that the entire mafia is on the case as well. It turns out that the actress who was the victim of an attempted murder actually is married to the head of one of the mafia families in the city, leading Cole and Stefan to have a responsibility to save and protect this criminal. It's one of those cases that really fleshes out LA as a character in itself, and it has some excellent moments, fantastic interrogations, and an awesome final showdown in a movie set. The Fallen Idol is absolutely iconic. Following that, we move to Vice, where Cole is finally partnered up with Roy Earl, and we start seeing the really seedy underworld of the city, starting with the Black Caesar. In this case, we uncover the first trail of the massive morphine insurge into the city, and we do so in a somewhat stereotypical way. We find two black jazz musicians dead from an overdose in their living room, and we track the morphine they overdosed on back to a shady betting agency. However, that's just the dealer, as we find the supplier to be the owner of an ice factory. It's revealed that the morphine is being shipped into the city via ice blocks. And after again some more fantastic investigations and a car chase through the city which is just excellent, we seemingly put a stop to this influx of morphine into the city. But there's clear foreshadowing and alluding to something bigger going on here. I would say the Black Caesar is absolutely great. Following this, we have another DLC case, which again showcases the racism that's present in certain parts of the LAPD in the 1950s. Oh, and by the way, I mentioned this in my retrospective that I made a few months back on this game, that the Vice cases often kind of hammer home on the idea of race and how racism was incorporated into police work in the 1950s. And someone commented just saying like, no, Noire never comments about race ever, and that I was like some like woke idiot. Like, do you not think there was racism in 1950s America? Are you fucking idiot? Anyway, this mission explores the massive expansion of weed, or as it's called in the 1950s, reefer in LA at this time. And it's revealed that this reefer is being supplied and distributed via soup cans in a soup factory. I'm gonna be honest, most of the DLC cases in this game aren't fantastic. This one's pretty good. It has some good shooting galleries. It's kind of interesting. I wouldn't say it's like massively flawed. I'd probably just say it's good. Now, the setup is a complete switch up of what we've seen before, as we go to a boxing match to find out that it was rigged. A certain washed up fighter was paid off to throw the fight, however his pride got in the way and he decided to not throw it and have his girlfriend bet on the fight to run away with the earnings. Now, this again is a story we've seen 1,000 times. I mean, it's the main crux of Pulp Fiction, and it does serve as quite a nice tribute to that film. However, just because it's cliched doesn't mean it falls flat. We get some of the best set pieces in the entire game in this mission, including easily the best tailing mission, along with a final shootout in the Egyptian theatre, which is just exquisite. The atmosphere of this entire mission is excellent. We get a further look into Roy Earl's shady nature, and we see Cole Phelps for the first time in the game just do away with his job, do away with the system, and allow the boxer to go off and live a peaceful life. At this point you really get an insight into how Cole has become jaded with the police force and how he would rather do the genuine right thing as opposed to what his higher ups say is the right thing. We see him losing trust in the authority around him. Yeah, the setup is really great. It's like fantastic. Okay, so this is probably where most people are going to disagree with me. We've got another DLC case, the Naked City. Now the Naked City, in my opinion, is ridiculously forgettable. We see a dead, overdosed Hollywood starlet, we find out about her corrupt doctor prescriptions, we uncover a greater conspiracy about a mass burglary. It should be really good. It should be fantastic. And I'm not gonna lie, a lot of it is. Its final cutscene is one of my favourite moments in the game. It's got this iconic shot atop a neon light covered building, but I don't know. It doesn't have the substance to carry its great moments. It has this grand scale epic feel, but the substance of the case itself just isn't very interesting. I think all of the characters fall flat, and what should have been one of the best cases in the game it becomes DLC. Yeah, the Naked City is very flawed. I'll put it that way. And capping off Vice, we have Manifest Destiny. Now Manifest Destiny is absolutely excellent, which is kind of a running theme with the first and last cases of each respective desk. Manifest Destiny is the mission in which Cole Phelps becomes a servant to his natural impulses. He cheats on his wife, he's sucked into the underworld of LA, all while uncovering the mass morphine ring started by his compatriots in the war. It starts out with a shooting in a nightclub, we're taken across the city, we meet all of these war veterans that we've seen in flashbacks throughout the game, Cole Phelps' old friends that see him as nothing more than a war criminal. It puts a different spin on Cole's character. It's kind of the culmination of his character development up to this point, from golden boy to broken hero. And again, it has all these separate set pieces that are sprinkled across the city that really make it a fascinating case. A case which also culminates in Roy Earl betraying Cole to protect the foundation of the morphine ring and all the other scams that Earl is involved in. The corruption that is rife across the city, from the police department to the government to the DA. Everyone's involved, and Cole is trying to bring it to an end. Roy Earl simply won't let that happen, and it leads to Cole being stripped of his badge, stripped of his gun, and demoted to the arson desk. Manifest Destiny is absolutely iconic. Now, the arson desk, in my opinion, is very underrated. There are a lot more story flaws in this desk. I think at this point, the writers almost became fatigued with the story. I mean, this game was so big for 2011 that it had to come on 3 discs, and at this point there was only so much more content they could provide. So a lot of the story points here are kind of rushed. This also leads to Biggs' character becoming really underappreciated, because although he has some of the best dialogue in the game, he has some of the most well and interestingly written conversations with Cole in the game, they're kind of undermined. They're only shown in, car scenes. He rarely gets a chance to shine in real story content. However, I think this mission's really interesting. We see Cole immediately jump to uncover some grand conspiracy, as that was the case in his last 2 desks, but Biggs shuts him down, and it seems by the end of the case that was rightfully so. The flyers that this mission start off with seem to genuinely just be a normal case of arson. By this point, Cole's character has been destroyed, and this is taking away the one part of him that he still had, his incredible detective work. He keeps chasing after false leads and false trails, only to realise that arson might just be as simple and boring as it's been told to him. It's a really interesting character exploration, and I think it's honestly pretty great. And this leads Cole perfectly into the next case, A Walk in Elysian Fields, where as it turns out, there is a genuine grand conspiracy going on, and Cole finally gets a chance to uncover it. But without the respect of his peers, he's unable to at this point, and so he calls on for the help of his old friend Jack Kelso. That being said, this mission's really just laying the foundation for that story to unfold, and for that reason, I'll just put it in good for now. Because House of Sticks is really where this comes to a head. Cole is slowly uncovering this conspiracy, this fraudulent attempt to make money off the backs of poor GIs by burning down their homes. However, Cole has no power to explore this, and so he needs to ask for the help of his old enemy, Jack Kelso, an insurance investigator turned private detective that doesn't want to help Cole but does want to do the right thing, which we've seen established since the very first flashback in the game. We uncover yet more abuses of power for sexual gratification by those in power, and we see how deep this rabbit hole really goes, as Jack's investigation eventually leads to him being completely beaten up and almost killed, if not for his nick of time escape, travelling back to Elsa Lichtman's apartment. House of Styx is absolutely iconic. And this leads into the second half of this story, continuing with Jack Kelso, continuing to uncover this conspiracy, having shootouts in the House of Records, and eventually confronting the head of the conspiracy, Leland Monroe, a housing magnate who Jack has to take down by force. We finally see the War of LA come to a head at a massive shootout at the Monroe Manor, and we see Jack Kelso in his absolute prime. A polite invitation once again goes an iconic. But then, the pacing of LA Noire is absolutely fucked with yet another DLC case. Nicholson electroplating again should have been a fantastic case. I mean, it's a KGB spy thriller about the explosion of a car factory that leads you to a massive shootout in a military warehouse. However, it comes at the absolute worst time imaginable. It comes right before the climax and finale of this game, and it brings the game to a screeching halt. It's a really interesting, entertaining, exciting mission in itself. However, because of its pacing, I can only put it in the flawed category. And so we come to the grand finale of LA Noire, a different kind of war. A mission that a lot of people thought was quite an underwhelming ending. It's a multi-part case in which Jack and Cole simultaneously uncover the truth about these fires across the city and this insurance fraud. And it leads to this massive culminative shootout in the sewers below LA. But it is definitely rushed. There's an excellent video on YouTube about why LA Noire needed another case, and I couldn't agree more, because this case really rushes every single revelation and crams it all into the span of about 20 minutes. And although the final revelations are really poignant and interesting, we find out what Cole did in the war, we find out the truth about the war, we find out what the creepy psychiatrist has been doing throughout the whole game, and we come face to face with true shell shock and PTSD. Yeah, it is just very rushed. The final shootout is an excellent mission in itself, and it leads to Cole sacrificing himself for the greater good, truly trying to make up for the war crimes he committed. But again, these revelations come so quickly one after the other that the player doesn't really have enough time to take it in and really feel the emotional impact of what they're seeing, which is why Cole's sacrifice felt a little bit underwhelming or confusing or whatever it may be. That being said, I would argue that it is made up for by the final cutscene in the game, in which we see Roy Earl of all people, with the DA beside him giving the commencement speech at Cole's funeral, lying through their teeth about how Cole was a war hero, about how he was mistreated, and about how he deserves respect. We're left with this horrible, pessimistic feeling. We're left feeling jaded, but we also understand that the intrinsic corrupt nature of the city isn't something that can be destroyed by one man, and that it would take a complete overhaul of the system to truly make a change. It's the exact way any noir story should end. And although it's not at all fantastic, it's not iconic, it's not great, I would say it is a good ending to what I consider to be a phenomenal game. However, that of course is just my opinion, and looking at my opinion, I gave this game a lot of credit. There's a lot of iconic missions in this game, and because of my personal connection to this game, I'm sure a lot of people will disagree with my opinions here. So let me know in the comments down below. What are your overall thoughts about this game? What do you think about my placement? What's your favorite mission in LA Noire? I want to explore doing more tier list videos and things like this, and things about other games that aren't Assassin's Creed, so if this video gets 50 likes, we'll do something else like it in the future. Like I said at the start of the video, my Patreon link will be in the description below. If you enjoyed, please do hit like. If you're new here, hit subscribe with post notifications turned on. Thank you so much for watching. And with all that being said, I've been Joe, aka Found a Scarab, and I will see you in the next one.